Hi, I'm Walter and I'm the Dutch mentor. Today we're going to have a guest that is coming out of a different industry that we have normally have as guest on our show, a chat about leadership. We have Joe Bailey. Welcome, Joe, for coming on today. He has been in the rotor wing industry, and funny enough, he was my CFI, who was daring enough to take me up in the first couple of hours. I told him right up front, by 5, 6 hours, tell me if this is for me, and I'm still here, just crossed my 100 hours, so I must have done something right along the way, but certainly enjoyed his guidance and his teachings. So I thought it was today for two things. I think it's good for leaders to listen to how other people went on their journey and what they find to be highlights in their journey and how to make transitions from one career to another career. But it's also important to message today for aspiring young aviators who are considering to go into aviation industry and learn from us, right? And I, as an adult, more senior person, making a transition, learning, I have a story to tell. But Joe has a very interesting story to tell, similar to myself, born and raised in Europe. He's from England, I'm from Holland. So
Yep.
Joe, without further ado, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll take this conversation where it may go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sounds good. Good afternoon, Walter, and congratulations on the 100 hours. It's always a big achievement. I know for most students, it's still a big achievement. So, like Walter said, my name's Joe. I'm from England originally. I sort of got into a lot of adventure sports in the UK and started teaching climbing and traveled around the world from, I don't know, 18 through to I was about 25. And one of the things I really did when I was younger was get involved with mountain rescue. So I spent a lot of time on the side of the mountain and worked with heli rescue services as well as mountain rescue services and helping people out. And that's where I kind of built my interest in flying. So from fairly early age, I was in and around helicopters, and I saw, now I'm in the industry, pilots who are way at the top of the game, flying in the Swiss Alps, Austrian Alps, um, doing some incredible stuff, really amazing pilotage. And later in life, about 5 years later after that, I had the opportunity to potentially to learn to fly. And just like yourself, I ended up at Independent Helicopters and took an intro flight and loved it. Like, loved to be in the sky, enjoyed the learning process. And through my background in adventure and adventure travel and education, I love the teaching process in what I would say is it is a dangerous environment, but it's a mitigated dangerous environment. So as long as you take the safe steps and you go through that process steadily, you can mitigate a lot of that risk and use that as a really good learning curve for anybody who's in that environment. So when I started learning flying helicopters and I saw the CFIs doing a similar process and mitigating your students' experience in that process, I was like all over it. I really enjoyed that. And from a teaching point of view, from a learning point of view, and to where I am today, I've always enjoyed that process. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into aviation. A little bit later in life, I decided to take that career change and get into that. And I've enjoyed every moment of it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you hit a word there called mitigation, right? And that's why I found it very interesting in your background of doing all the risky stuff that as many times on a slippery slope. It didn't take a whole lot to
Yeah.
be able to slide down and have a detrimental outcome. People refer to helicopter flying often that too, right? It's just in rock in the sky with a rotor disc on top holding it up. If something breaks, you might as
Right.
well turn around and kiss your you know what goodbye. You
Yeah.
and I have learned over time that is not necessarily the case. And there's actually today, as a fixed wing pilot and a helicopter pilot, I'd rather do an out of rotation to a spot than having to do a flight, taking an airplane down without an engine in the confined area. Because I know we're going to
Oh,
put the helicopter somewhere. Well, good luck on the airplane flying it into very, very small places. But I think the word mitigation is really important. So crew resource management is a common terminology that we are starting to adopt into healthcare as well, where what it really means is that we make a joint decision based on the facts that are presented to us, so we don't force things, and round
yeah.
peg to a square hole. So talk a little bit about that on how you use that methodology of crew resource management or mitigation, risk mitigation, principles in making sure that whatever you do is safe.
So I think crew resource management is actually a very easy way to look at this process. So one of the things I love about that process, there's two sides to every single decision you ever make. And it doesn't matter what we're looking at. So if we're looking at the weather, it might be this weather is outside of my personal minimums and what I'm safe and currently happy to fly in. And this weather is I'm perfectly acceptable to fly in. When you start looking at that in crew and you've got 2 people in a helicopter, 3 people in a helicopter, maybe you've got a medical crew in the back of a helicopter, every single person needs to be on the same page on that decision. And my decision, your decision, and whoever we're talking to is going to be different. So the PIC will always take the lead responsibility in deciding if a final decision on if they're going to take up, go and fly, go and do that. So as a CFI, there was multiple times where I knew the weather we were going to go out in was on the edge of what my student was either comfortable in, willing to fly, but they were going to get a good learning experience from that. So one of the things you do as the CFI is go, okay, well, am I comfortable flying in this? Am I comfortable dealing with every other emergency scenario, what potentially may happen on the flight we're going to do if, yeah, worst case scenario, my student isn't in a learning situation. They've overfreshed, they've gone past where they're going to actually continue to learn in that scenario. So now you start working on the principle that you're in control of the helicopter, you're in control of the aircraft, and you still need to get home safely. So if you can't do that, it doesn't matter what your student's doing, you probably shouldn't be taking off. You probably shouldn't be doing that and going into that experience. So good learning experience and then good decision-making based off that crew management is really hard to find that unique, and something which you're about to do. You're about to go and do your CFI, Walter, and this is something you'll talk about momentarily and over again, I'm sure. But every leader, even when I was teaching climbing, going into the mountains, going into backcountry skiing, you know, you will stand at the top of the slope to go and ski. There might be 6 people skiing that slope. You have to think about the weakest person and if they have the ability to do what it is you're about to ask them to do. And it's different in different situations. In a helicopter, I have the ability to take over the helicopter, take over and look after my student and myself in the situation we're in. In something like mountaineering or climbing or something like that, they are solely by themselves. Once we've entered the situation, there's nothing I can do for that person apart from their ability to do what it is they've decided. So my experience in that world really reflected and really came into aviation in its own way. So mitigation and leadership is a really interesting twist on how we play those things out.
Yeah, so it is a worthy tool for people to learn, and I think this goes across all of industries, right? It is that before you start, and it always in this preparation, mitigation, response, and recovery in anything that you do. But so take that to another level of understanding. So competency is something that we look for in leaders, but competency is not by reading a book. It's not something you do just one time. And I sometimes, I try to encourage it, just, the mentees that I have in my life as a coach today or as an executive in healthcare, but I'm sure that as a future CFI, and I'd love to hear your opinion about that. You have to separate, competency comes over time with experience. Therefore, you need to have trained for skill and you have trained for knowledge. And it's when you combine skills and knowledge together and really understand what could happen and how do things work, where competency is birthed from. So how do you get a new student, a new person to think about the fact that, listen, competency takes time and effort, and how can you bring those two things together?
So competency is a really interesting one, right? So if I think about leaderships within teams, which I've worked in, it's understanding what you are competent at and you understand and you have a good knowledge base of, but also understanding what you're weak at. And they're the people you want to surround yourself with, and that will only grow your own knowledge and grow your own competency in those areas. So for students, when you're teaching students in aviation, you want to get the fundamentals down, whatever those fundamentals might be to you as a CFI. So think about those 4 big blocks, right? You've got weather, you've got the physical skill element of what is happening in the helicopter. You've got the understanding of the aircraft itself, so the actual ground knowledge, portions around systems, understanding of that. And then you've got this sort of like fourth box. This fourth box is the linkage between all three of the others. And, you know, it doesn't rain without clouds. We don't get lightning without clouds and thunder, you know, but understanding that those things need to be all there to create what we class as a thunderstorm, and seeing how that builds up over time and the different styles of clouds we get on the forefront and back, that just takes time and knowledge. So surrounding your student with the information which is available and in small chunks to build that competency up to eventually build and link it all together. So a lot of students and a lot of CFIs, and a little bit of the process we went through was we spent the first 5 to 10 hours really just hands-on inside the helicopter. We'd go through in-depth pre-flights, we'd get in the helicopter, we'd go and fly, and we really just make sure that the student is gonna get hands-on and get physical and understand what it is they're setting out to try and achieve. Through the back of that, we start teaching systems, because that helps with the understanding of how to hover, how to move forward, how to move the helicopter left, right, straight forward, vertically, whatever it is we might be able to do. The systems allow you to understand how the lift is produced in the helicopter, how an order rotation may work, the freewheeling unit, whatever it is we're talking about. And then off the back of that, we talk about how the weather influences that lesson. And we try and separate all these things to start with, so that the competency on each area is built up from the ground up. Then later in your training, we try to bring all four together, or all three together. And that's where that sort of like Venn diagram sort of gets a little bit more confusing. You end up in the middle, and you can bounce between topics and see how all the topics relate to each other. From the lift in the helicopter being changed by density altitude and density air in the weather, which then creates how the helicopter feels when you're in the helicopter. All of a sudden, when you can link all of them together, you're starting to bring in that knowledge.
Yeah.
And a good CFI, and at least from my experience, when I watch CFIs go, hey, yeah, like here's a system, I'm going to teach you about system, but I want you to go and spend 2 hours with this other person who understands mechanics a lot more and can understand that explosive element, what's happening in that 4-cylinder system. Those are the people who go, hey, like I know enough to be able to teach you this, but it's also not my like great area of expertise, and you should go and talk to X, who's going to be able to expand on this so much more. So finding, if you are an aviator, you're going to go into aviation, finding a school who isn't just, hey, you're going to work with this person, stick with this person your whole time. Finding someone who is willing to let you go and learn from other people, let you branch out and see how other styles is really, really vital to a learning experience. And it will help your knowledge and your competency on what it is you're learning.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think that you and I did that from time to time. I flew with Heather, I flew with other CFIs, and each time you went out, you learn nuances, right? So it's also a check to make sure that you stay on track. But yeah, very well put together, right? It is the combination of factors that come together, and that the full understanding, the competency comes from it. That my father would say, you don't know something until you can teach it. But what you don't know is even more important, and to be able to have those resources available, like you said, that you can steer people to in order to gain that. So flying, leading is about self-awareness, right? Yep. And it's about this deep commitment to continuous development and improvement of self. So now that you have gone through your route, you get your 5, 6, 1,000 hours, you have now taken on a commercial job flying in New York City. How do you continuously, keep yourself committed to developing as a pilot?
Yeah, it's a good question, because, it's very easy to get to, and we all do this, right? It doesn't matter what stage of life we're in, but it's very easy to get to a stage of life, get comfortable in the salary you're on, whatever it is, and go in and do your 9 to 5 and walk away and leave it. And as a pilot, is probably one of the, complacency is the worst thing we can ever do. Yeah. The minute we get complacent in the aircraft, the minute we start, oh yeah, I learned the emergency procedures, but I did it 6 months ago and I've not thought about it. So occasionally when I'm on the deck, I'll like switch on my check lights and look at all of my emergency lights, and I'll pick one. And while I'm pick one, I'm just running through that process in my head. And if I don't know it, or I can't get to the end of that emergency procedure, that night I'm going to pick it up, I'm going to go and look through it. Or on my next down day when it's wet, I'm going to pick up the RFM and I'm going to roll through it and just sort of make sure and keep myself refreshed. And this is just something which, for me, is habit. And I hope that many pilots go and do the same thing. But I don't believe anyone is absolutely perfect, right? Doesn't matter who you are. You could be a copy editor, you could be a typer, whatever. We all put a letter in the wrong place. We put a bullet point in the wrong place. It takes time to go back and review those things, right? So, you know, as a pilot, I try to keep myself fresh on those things. And then you really got to be careful about the place you work, right? So some companies are better than others, and it just depends on where you go in the industry. But, you know, I like to think the company I've ended up working for, they check us every 6 months. We do a little like review flight with our training captain. There's always training going on, and that happens in the staff room. And anyone's like willing to like sit in with that, check in with that, or you're listening to it constantly. And those kind of things keep us on our game, and those are the things that do keep us safe. And complacency is the worst thing we can get into. So whatever it is, you might be with another pilot. I'll do my startup, I'll start up the helicopter or the aircraft. And before I go to take up, I'll just ask the other pilot, hey, did I miss anything? And just hope that they've been going through it. And if they say, yeah, you missed, you know, your position lights, cool. I didn't miss it, right? I checked, right? But those kind of cross double checks is important to keep us all safe. And if you see something, say something, you know. I was down on the heliport the other day, and it's nighttime or it's just going dark. So, you know, you don't really need your landing light on. It was just going dark, and I just got on the radio and was just like, hey, whatever it is, 1 Papa Hotel, like, do you mind just putting your lights on? And he was like, oh, thanks. And he just flicked his lights on, and it wasn't dark yet. He didn't need them on, but like, it's just a courtesy check and looks after him, and it makes me a bit safer because I know where they are in the sky. So, you know, just stay on top of it.
Yeah. So I think this is a great job, and I think we have come full circle on the amount of time that we said we were going to do this in, because you and I can talk about this like pilots can,
I know,
hours and hours and hours, right? Endless. So, Joe, I really want to thank you for taking the time to kind of give a little glimpse into what a helicopter pilot needs to do on a day-to-day basis, how you got to become a helicopter pilot. But most importantly, for the audience who will be both leaders in inside and outside of healthcare and other organizations, it is about making sure that we follow some set of order and we have great self-awareness, true commitment to continuous self-development, and you know, checklist, right, is another really good point to keep in mind. Any parting words, any young aviators who might be on the fence of should I or can I do this?
Yeah, you know, I would just say go and try it. Go and get your hands-on experience. I think that intro flight, which we all started at, is a fantastic tool to find out if you like it and you want to do it. And then if you want to pursue it, ask the right questions. If you are struggling to find a good school or don't know what to ask, you know, reach out to Walter. There's lots of resources out there. But ask the right questions. Find the school which is going to work for you. There are schools which work really well for some students. They create really good structure. There's other schools out there which have flexible schedules, lots of really good CFIs. And the process to becoming a CFI is an in-depth process. Now, any CFI had to go through that. Chances are, if they have been doing it for, you know, they've been teaching for 200-300 hours, they are pretty dedicated to the cause, and they're looking out for you guys as much as it is that you're going to be there and go through that process. So just keep it up. It's, you know, practice takes time. You will get better. Don't just get frustrated and can't hover in 10 hours or whatever it is. It takes time. You know, I always used to say to people, and Walter was one of these people, I'm sure, that it takes 12 hours of straight hovering just to be able to hold that helicopter. Now, that might be 100% true. It might be a little bit off, but it just depends on you. And don't get frustrated with it. Keep it up.
Yeah. That sets the winners and losers apart. People, you know, be resilient and don't give up. But be realistic and pragmatic at the same time about it, right? Because it isn't
for sure
costly undertaking. Joe, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk soon again.
Yeah, no problems, Walter. Have a great day.